Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
I am back with professional speaker and author James Robilotta. We've been discussing how he helps audiences transform their leadership, connections, and overall impact on the world with a unique blend of humor and profound insights. Now, James, I'd love to get your take on something that I strongly believe in, that people don't work for companies, they actually work for their families.
That sounds really beautiful. I think we all have different internal compasses, and we all have different baggage that we bring in because of trauma or loss or our own self-esteem or whatever that we bring into every situation. And I think there are some people that are longing for approval and longing for recognition and longing for those kinds of things that I could see maybe they work a little bit more for a boss, or for that recognition. At the same time, there's also people that are longing for love and to be accepted and to be seen and to be heard. And if they have found a group of people, ideally their family or whatever family means to them, like you said, then they're motivated by that. So I think a lot of it comes back down to what is the internal motivation and what learning happened or what unlearning needs to happen within some of that, either trauma or this past experiences or what things that we were taught by well-meaning individuals or sometimes not well-meaning individuals that stuck with us. I think a lot of that is what drives it. What are those internal fears? You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and security. Security means different things to different people. If you were raised with more than enough, then security means something completely different to you than someone who is raised with not more than enough. But at the same time, that's still the bottom rung of your Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. And whatever security means to you, I think that is often one of the biggest drivers. And therefore, whether people work for their boss or people work for their family or their, that loved ones, I think can sometimes be determined by that.
Wonderful perspective on that. I appreciate it very much. I was looking at your YouTube, preparing for a conversation, and you talked about the one thing all leaders must do. Can you share what they must do with everyone?
Leaders have to take responsibility for what environments they create and what results occur because of those environments that they create and actions that they take. This is why leaders get paid more than non-leaders. It's because of responsibility. But just because you have more responsibility doesn't mean you're taking more responsibility for your actions, for those results, for the emotions that you cause, whether intentionally or unintentionally. One of the most powerful phrases out there, or I guess phrases or juxtaposition so much is intent versus impact. And
it's a good one.
It is one thing to tell me that your intent was something. It's another thing to take responsibility for the impact, even if your intent wasn't what actually happened. To take responsibility for the impact of it is what leaders need to do. And so where do you stand in the, hey, you know what? I messed up. That wasn't my intent. And not but. And I recognize that despite my intent being this, that the impact was that. And that sucks. And I need to apologize for that. I need to stand in my own whatever and say like, hey, that's on me. I got to do better next time. Here's how I could have handled that. I think like flippant apologies aren't actual apologies. Or apologies where we say like, I'm sorry you felt that way, right? That's not an apology. As opposed to, hey, that was me. I could have done something better there. I made a choice. The choice didn't go as planned. And I need to take responsibility for that.
That's a wonderful way to look at it. I look at it as unintended consequences to your decisions.
Mm,
We as leaders have to make decisions, and not all people want to make the decision or get in the driver's seat.
yeah.
So sometimes, if you don't make a decision, then you're paralyzed. If you make a decision, it's the wrong decision, have the courage to step up and say, oops, I was wrong. And
Hmm.
this is why I was wrong. And this is what the intention was. Let's do it all over again, right? Let's try
Yeah.
differently, because that's what you talk about that, kind of that we're imperfect, all of us. Nobody is. And there's this phenomenon that people who work for us, I'm a CEO of my company, you're a CEO of your company, and people look at us like we're aliens, like we're not humans, like we're not, like we don't matter too. That's such a weird phenomenon that employees look at their leaders as if they don't have feelings.
Hmm. Yeah. Kathleen, well said. Yeah, or like, you should have all your stuff figured out.
Yeah.
Or you're this, so you're done with the race. And meanwhile, we're all still running it.
Exactly. That phrase, you've got your stuff all figured out. I mean, yeah.
Hmm.
That's hysterical.
Yeah,
I mean,
hysterical.
I
My counselor thinks it's
it
funny too, if I were to tell her that.
I I know. I was on a call with one of my people this morning with a prospective client, and it was, you matter too. I mean, the leader matters and the employee matters, and that authentic self can help you really get to the point of we're in it together. We all matter. It's not you versus me. It's you and me. It's that
Hmm.
really important. And so when you speak or work with companies, what exercises do you use to help individuals and teams embrace their imperfections and use them to their advantage?
First off, I love where this conversation is going. And I think there's a couple things that I do. Number one is that I have people share their food quirks also, right? Like let's, let it not just be me. And then later on in the talk, I share an embarrassing story and I have other people share an embarrassing story. The one I share about is when I dislocated my right knee dancing to Shania Twain's "Man, I Feel Like a Woman" at my senior prom. Um,
Lovely.
but let us all remember that we have embarrassing stories, because when we share them, whether we recognize it or not, they help us remember that we are resilient. Right in that moment, that moment, it sucked. It was embarrassing. It was hard. Maybe you were in pain. Maybe it was hurtful. Maybe it was sad. Maybe it was angering. Maybe it was hysterical. Whatever it was, you wish it happened to somebody else, but it was you.
Hmm.
And now here we are, 30 years later, and we're laughing about it because we're fine. Um,
Hmm.
and uh, and so I have people share some of those kinds of things in longer workshops. One question that I ask, if we really get in there, is what's one lie you tell yourself every single day?
Mm.
And I have people kind of talk about some of those kinds of things, especially when it comes to the workplace, right? Where does your imposter syndrome creep in? What are the
Hmm.
stories that you're telling yourself at work? And a lot of times it sounds like I'm not good enough, I'm not successful enough, I'm not far enough along, or I'm not qualified enough, or so and so is better at that than I am, so why aren't
Mm.
they here? And we discount the things that we do bring into the room just because we don't bring everything. um,
Mhm.
and uh, and so yeah, so we get into some of those kinds of things as well. And trying to encourage individuals to remember that you weren't hired because you were the most perfect. You were hired because you were the most trusted. And there's a big difference between that. So trying to do some activities around that. And then sometimes I have the opportunities to bring in some of my improv comedy background into work that I get to do with leaders. And so I'll work with executive teams or new managers or whomever, but smaller groups of folks, typically under 100, and we'll have them do some improv activities where we pair up and have this conversation, pair up and do this activity, or get into this small group. And a lot of that's around listening, and thinking about how do you listen, and where are you getting in your own way and maybe your team's way because you're not spending enough time listening, and start trying to get people to reflect on when do I listen and when do I speak and why.
Well, that's great. If more people said, "When do I speak? What should I say, and why?" Maybe we'd have better conversations. But I mean, your your work, your comment about imposters. Have you heard about the work from the Stanford professor on positive intelligence? Have you heard
I have
about that
not, so
work at all?
I'd love to hear you tell me more about it, Kathleen.
It's so cool. It's about the fact that we all have saboteurs in our little head running around telling us, you're not good enough. You're too short. You're too fat. You're too skinny. Your hair isn't blonde. You're not 6 foot tall. You can't wear a size 6. You can only wear a size 2. You can't wear, I mean, it's just crazy. We have all these saboteurs that we have to fight almost daily. And they have exercises that kind of help you when you identify a saboteur is entering into your mindset. Exercises to remove you from the saboteur language and move into thank you for coming. I'm ignoring you. You're not the voice. It's the voices in your head type of work. I'll send you a link to it. But for the listeners too, positive intelligence is a Stanford professor, which I'm going to butcher his name, but we'll put it in the notes. Wonderful work that talks about identifying those imposters who tell us we can't, we shouldn't, we couldn't, we won't, and we have to overcome them every single day. So tell us more about your how 12 years ago you got into this Story Matters business after being an amazing resident director for 2 different organizations, and being really in the academic world and taking care of people who are in academics. How did you trip into, hey, I'm going to go be an author, a professional speaker? How did you do that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If I can go back really quick, Kathleen, it's interesting hearing your talk about the positive intelligence work and these saboteurs. It reminds me a lot of internal family systems counseling, where
Mm,
we all have these parts in us, and what are the parts in us that we need to heal, and what are the parts that we need to tell them that, like, hey, you're still trying to protect me after all these years, but I'm good now, and so you can rest and you can lower your guard down, and I can set a boundary now, or I can stand up for myself, or I can whatever, right? Like, or I can be hurt and I'll be okay, or I can
mhm.
trust a little more. It's interesting. It reminds me a lot of that. I'm going to look up this positive intelligence stuff and the saboteur language. It sounds really fascinating. I'm curious where that stemmed from. So thank you for that
It would.
resource.
You're welcome. It would complement your work quite a bit. So,
Yeah, yeah, I
Story
agree with you.
Matters, dear.
So yeah,
You came into Story Matters.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So I was as a student leader. You know this. You go to a number of conferences, and then as a leader of student leaders, a higher education
Yes.
professional, I then had the opportunity to be the advisor and take those students to some of those conferences that helped me grow as a student. And those conferences had calls for proposals. And I was there and didn't, there were student conferences, so I didn't have much to do. And so I was like, well, am I just going to sit around here? And I noticed that there was a call for proposals, and I was like, well, I like attention. And so maybe I got something to share here. But yeah, the goal back then was to be a vice president of a university. That's what I really wanted to do. And so
Really?
I would submit these programs just as something to do at conferences, and because I did like attention and thought I had some things that, like, hey, I stepped in the muck as a student leader, and here are some things that where I stepped in the muck where maybe you could avoid and would shorten your learning curve. And so I got up and started submitting just workshops at these conferences. It was never the keynote, but just submitted workshops for fun. And somebody came up to me after one of my sessions and asked me how much I charged. And I politely said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, I guess you could buy me a sandwich, but we'll work
Or a
for food.
pancake.
Yeah, pancake, sure. Yeah, I'm easy. I'm easy, Kathleen. But it was in that moment where I was like, I don't think this person's going up to everybody and saying that. So maybe I got a little something here. And so I started researching professional speakers and what they did and what that looked like. And I spoke for free for a bunch of years because I didn't think I was good enough or my story was good enough. Honestly, I didn't know who really wanted to hear some white boy cry about when he was homesick his first year of college. And Kathleen, between you and I, big market, big market. um, so, but yeah, but that's so yeah. Slowly began to charge and put it out to colleagues and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing," and so yeah, so I spoke for free for a couple of years, and then I went on my own. I've been full time as a professional speaker. August will be 13 years.
Congratulations. That's
Thanks, friend.
beautiful. And,
Thank you.
I think a lot of people don't realize that we as speakers, as part of our identity, not our whole identity, but we do have to start somewhere. So we don't just wake up in the morning one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to go be a speaker." It is hard
Mhm.
work. It's the business of speaking. So I'm glad you shared that story. That's awesome. And, so what's next for you? What else do you do for companies, for clients, for individuals? Obviously a speaker is one part of who James is, but what else
Yeah.
do you do for people?
Yeah, I love that. So Story Matters, as you mentioned, that's our company, and I'm married to a woman named Tina Van Steenberg, and Tina is also a professional speaker. So we got two
Mm,
professional speakers under one roof, which means we have a long distance relationship with the same address.
lovely.
And and Tina talks to women about why women need women and how for women confidence should be a team sport. And so she's doing some really cool work in there. And so I bring that up, to shout her out because she's awesome, but also to say that we're starting to try to put on some of our own events. Tina created a women's conference called Persist, a badass women's conference. That's its formal title. And so she's been doing that and trying to do that more and more to get to speak on her own stages. And I've done a conference called Living Imperfectly a couple of times, where it's kind of taking my leading imperfectly stuff, but just taking out the leadership piece and just talking about life. That
Hmm.
leading imperfectly talk, I've been told, is a mental health talk disguised as a leadership talk, and I agree with that assessment, and I'm not mad at it either. And so, what if we just took out the leadership piece and just talked about life? And so it's a day and a half conference where we kind of get in there and talk about where we get in our own way and what are we going to do next and that kind of stuff. So I'm also looking forward to. I'm going to start doing some all men's work as well.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
men are a fascinating work in progress, myself included. And so, what if we created spaces that where men felt comfortable, like you were talking about earlier with the leaders, but
Hmm.
where we took our guard down and just said, hey, what if we weren't competing right now? What if we were just met each other where we were and talked about how we're actually doing and not how we want each other to think we're doing? I
Hmm.
think that could be some really powerful work. I think it would lead to better men, and I think it would lead to better understanding and listening and rights and voting things for women as well. And so, those are important. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we're working on. We're starting a facilitator model where we've been doing what we've been doing for quite some time, which is really exciting. But, could more people hear this message if we found some more creative folks to deliver it as well? And so
Hmm.
that would also enable us to stay home. We're having a baby in a month, and we have a two and a
Oh,
half year old.
baby. Hmm.
Yep, it's so exciting. And
Hmm.
so, so we're also trying to figure out some ways to stay home a little bit more, and so we can be the parents that we'd like to be as well.
That's awesome. That is so great. People need you right now because the the reporting of mental health in the workplace, and that's the data I know from Korn Ferry, is about 50% of all people who work in the United States are reporting some form of mental health disruption, issues, challenges right now. And the work that you're doing to just help people identify that we're all perfectly imperfect, and bringing us to the table to talk about the fact that we didn't get here because we're perfect. We got here because we risked being imperfect. out loud in the middle of the arena. One of my favorite quotes, James, is from Roosevelt, and it's the man in the arena. You know, it's easy for people to sit on the sidelines and criticize that person or whoever's standing in the middle of the arena. You know, it's easier for them to criticize, but you're trying to bring people together to talk about their challenges, and we need you now. We really all need you.
I completely agree. That quote is powerful. It fuels one of my role models, Brene Brown, obviously daring greatly. A lot of that came out of
I
that
love
work.
her.
A mutual friend of ours, Joe Mull, talks a lot about the arena.
I like him.
Yeah, he's a good one. I love that. It's such a powerful quote. That whole speech or poem,
It's
whatever it is.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
how
it's
do people
incredible.
find you, James, if they want to do work with you?
I am James T. Robo, James T. Robo, all over the internet. So whether that's Instagram or Twitter, or I'm sure if you even popped it in LinkedIn, then you wouldn't have to worry about how to spell my last name. But I think I still come up that way too. Or I'm James Robilotta on LinkedIn. But yeah, james2robo.com is the website if people want to learn more about that. And I do some coaching as well. So if people want to hear about that, that's kind of where all that lives.
Well, will I see you at Influence 2023?
My friend, you will not,
No.
unfortunately, because of this child. I'm sorry. Blame the newborn. I
Well,
know I
no, I'm
am.
not going to blame the baby. I'm just not going to do that. Well, I'll see you somewhere. I know we are going to intersect somewhere along this journey. And thank you for showing up as your perfectly imperfect self and spending some time with me.
Thank you, Kathleen. I love the way that your brain works and the work that you do. So this is really special getting to share this time with you. Thank you.
You are so welcome. That will do it for another episode of Dare to Care in the Workplace. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get my new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love if you could leave a review on Apple or Spotify so more folks like yourself can discover the show. Until we meet again.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.